I'm Madison, 32 female. I live in a small, quiet town in a condo I bought 2 years ago, a place filled with books and historical maps. As a professional genealogist, my entire life revolves around uncovering the hidden stories within family trees, piecing together the past for clients who want to understand where they came from. It was a neat, orderly life, built on the foundation of what I thought was my own perfectly normal, loving family. That was until a simple DNA test, a gift I bought on a whim, revealed that the biggest secret I would ever uncover was my own. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. If you had asked me a few months ago to describe my family, I would have used words like stable, supportive, and unremarkably normal. We were the picture-perfect family you'd see in a holiday catalog. My father, Henry, is an engineer, a man of quiet strength and unwavering logic. He taught me how to change a tire, build a bookshelf, and approach every problem with a calm, methodical mind. His love was a constant, a bedrock I never once thought to question. He was the one who would sit with me for hours while I did my homework, not giving me the answers, but patiently guiding me until I found them myself. He had this quiet pride in his eyes whenever I accomplished something, no matter how small. His hands, calloused from a lifetime of building and fixing things, were the same hands that held me when I was sick and applauded the loudest at my university graduation. He wasn't a man of many words, but his actions spoke volumes. Our bond was forged in shared projects in his workshop, the smell of sawdust and varnish a permanent fixture of my childhood memories. He was my hero, the man I measured all others against. My mother, Catherine, is the opposite of my father in many ways. She's a university dean, a woman of sharp intellect, ambition, and a certain social grace that always seemed just out of my reach. She's charismatic and commanding, the kind of person who can walk into a room and immediately have everyone's attention. Our relationship was more complicated. While my dad's love was a quiet, steady warmth, my mother, S, was a dazzling, sometimes conditional, light. She pushed me to be the best, to excel in everything I did, from academics to social etiquette. Her approval was something I craved, a prize to be won. We had our moments of closeness, usually when I achieved something she deemed worthy of praise, a scholarship, a prestigious internship, my master's degree. But there was always a faint, unspoken distance between us, a sense that I could never quite live up to the image she had for me. She loved me, I never doubted that, but it often felt like she loved the idea of a successful daughter more than the actual person I was. Then there was my uncle, David. He is my mother's older brother, a family lawyer who handled all our affairs with a friendly, almost paternalistic authority. Uncle David was a fixture at every holiday, every birthday, every significant family event. He was the fun uncle, the one who'd slip me a $20 bill when my parents weren't looking and tell me stories of his and my mother's childhood mischief. He always had a ready smile and a comforting word. When I was looking to buy my condo, he was the one who went over all the legal paperwork with me, explaining the jargon in simple terms. He called it looking out for my favorite niece. He and my mother shared a bond that was intensely close. They often spoke in a shorthand of inside jokes and shared glances that no one else could penetrate. I always admired their sibling connection, thinking it was a model of what family should be. Looking back, I see that impenetrable closeness in a much more sinister light. Our family traditions were sacred. Every year, we'd spend a week in the summer at a lake house, and every Christmas Eve, the entire extended family would gather at my parents' house for a grand dinner. It was a night of warmth, laughter, and predictability. The same decorations came out of the same boxes, the same classic holiday songs played on the stereo, and my mother would cook the same elaborate meal she'd been making for 30 years. It was a tradition I cherished, a symbol of our family's enduring stability. My life, my identity, was built upon this foundation. I was Madison, daughter of Henry and Catherine, niece of David. My roots were deep and secure. I was a genealogist who, ironically, never felt the need to explore her own lineage because I thought I knew it all. There were no mysteries, no skeletons in our family closet. It was all there, neat and tidy, chronicled in photo albums filled with smiling faces and milestones celebrated. I had a loving father, a successful mother, and a doting uncle. I had a history. I was PR. Ood of a story with a clear and simple beginning. That was the portrait I saw, the one I believed in with all my heart. But every portrait, no matter how perfect it seems from a distance, can hide brushstrokes of deceit, and mine was about to be ripped from its frame. The truth was, my entire life, my very identity, was built on a meticulously crafted lie, and the people I trusted most were its architects. It started with a sale. One of those 2-for-1 deals on a popular DNA testing kit that popped up in my social media feed. As a genealogist, I was familiar with all of them. I'd used their databases countless times to help clients break through brick walls in their research, connecting them with distant cousins and uncovering long-lost relatives. I'd always been curious about my own deep ancestry, the migratory paths of my ancestors from thousands of years ago, but I'd never felt a pressing need to do it. My family tree was thoroughly documented on both sides, or so I thought. My mother's side was traced back to Irish immigrants in the 19th century, and my father's to German farmers who settled in the Midwest. It was all very straightforward. On a whim, fueled by a slow Tuesday afternoon, I bought the 2-kit package. I figured my dad, Henry, would find it interesting. He loved science and history, and I thought it would be a fun little project for us to do together, to see if the science matched the family stories we'd been told for generations. When the kits arrived, I presented one to him. He was amused, his eyes twinkling as he read the instructions. "So this little tube is going to tell me if I'm really German?" he chuckled. "Let's see if it's as smart as your grandmother's records." We sat at the kitchen table, laughing and joking as we collected our samples. It was a light-hearted, trivial moment, one of thousands of similar moments we had shared over the years. It felt completely insignificant, a fun distraction. I mailed the kits back the next day and, honestly, forgot all about them. My work was busy, and the weeks passed in a blur of client reports and archival research. I was deep into a fascinating case for a client, tracing their lineage back to colonial America, and it was consuming all my professional attention. The email arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. The subject line was simple: "Your DNA results are in." I felt a small flutter of excitement. I made a cup of coffee and sat down at my computer, clicking the link with the casual curiosity of someone expecting to see a confirmation of what they already know. The dashboard loaded, a colorful pie chart breaking down my ethnicity estimate: 52% Irish, 45% French, 3% Scandinavian. I smiled. The Irish part was dead on, matching my mother's side perfectly. The French was a little surprising, but not unheard of. Sometimes these tests picked up on older, forgotten ancestry. I clicked over to the DNA relatives section, the part of the site that connects you with genetic matches. This was the feature I used most for my clients, and that's when my world tilted on its axis. At the very top of the list under the category Immediate Family was a name I didn't recognize. It wasn't my father, it was my uncle. Under his name, David, were the words, "Father." I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. It had to be a mistake, a glitch in the system, a catastrophic error. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic, panicked rhythm. I refreshed the page. The words were still there. "David, father." My breath hitched in my throat. I clicked on my dad's profile, his results having come in at the same time. The site had automatically linked our kits. Under his name, Henry, the prediction was uncle. I felt the air leave my lungs in a painful rush. It was impossible. It was a nightmare. This couldn't be real. I spent the next hour frantically clicking through every link, every setting, every piece of information the site offered, searching for an explanation, for a mistake. I ran the raw data through third-party analysis tools, my professional training kicking in on autopilot while my emotional state was in complete freefall. The science was unforgiving. The number of shared centimorgans, the unit used to measure genetic linkage between my uncle and me, was in the undeniable range for a parent-child relationship. The number I shared with Henry was in the range of an uncle-nephew-niece relationship. It wasn't a glitch. It was a fact, a cold, hard, biological certainty. The man who raised me, the man I called Dad, the man whose blood I thought I shared, was not my biological father. My biological father was his brother-in-law, my uncle. And if my uncle was my father, then that meant my mother. My mind recoiled from the implication. My mother and her brother. A wave of nausea washed over me. I stumbled to the bathroom and was sick. I leaned against the cool tile of the flow. Or the world spinning around me. Every memory, every holiday, every family photo was suddenly cast in a sickening new light. The way my mother and uncle always stood a little too close. Their private jokes. The way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching. All these little details I had never thought to question now screamed a truth I couldn't bear to face. The portrait of my perfect family shattered into a million pieces, and in its place was something ugly and twisted. My entire life, all 32 years of it, had been a lie. And the people at the center of that lie, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, were my own mother and uncle. The silence in my condo was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing as I tried to comprehend the enormity of their betrayal. For 2 days, I was paralyzed. I didn't leave my condo. I didn't answer my phone. I just sat in the suffocating silence. The words David, father, burned into my mind. The initial shock gave way to a hollow, aching numbness, and then, slowly, a cold, quiet anger began to smolder in its place. I am a genealogist. My job is to find the truth, to follow the threads of evidence until a clear picture emerges. The habits of my profession became my only lifeline. If my life was a lie, I was going to uncover every single detail of it. I needed proof beyond the DNA. I needed context. I needed to understand how this could have happened, how they could have hidden it for so long. My parents' attic was the logical place to start. It was a repository of our family's history, boxes of old photographs, letters, and documents I hadn't looked at in years. On Saturday morning, fueled by a grim determination, I drove to their house. I told them I was working on a personal project, a detailed family history book, and needed to go through some of the old records. It was a plausible lie, and they bought it without question. My mother, Catherine, smiled her perfectly polished smile. "What a wonderful idea, darling. Let me know if you need anything." My father, Henry, offered to help me carry the heavy boxes down. The guilt was a physical weight in my chest as he helped me, his face showing nothing but kindness and pride in my project. He had no idea he was helping me unearth the very lie that defined his life. Once I was in the dusty, dimly lit attic, I felt a strange sense of calm. This was my territory. I was no longer a victim adrift in a sea of confusion. I was a researcher on a mission. I started with the photo albums, going back to the years just before I was born. My parents' wedding photos were there, of course. Henry looked so young and hopeful. Catherine was a radiant bride. And in almost every picture, there was David, my uncle, standing right next to them. He was the best man. I scrutinized their faces, their body language, searching for clues I had missed before, and I found them. There was a photo of the wedding reception. Henry was talking to some relatives, his back turned. In the background, partially obscured, were Catherine and David. They were standing close, their heads nearly touching. He was whispering something in her ear, and she was smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile that was different from the one she had in the photos with her new husband. It was intimate, conspiratorial. I kept digging. I found a box labeled college. Inside were my mother's old yearbooks and photo albums from her university days. She and my uncle had attended the same university, though he was 2 years ahead of her. And there, tucked between the pages of a chemistry textbook, was a small stack of loose photos held together by a brittle rubber band. My hands trembled as I looked at them. They were pictures of just Catherine and David. In one, they were at the beach, laughing, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. In another, they were at a party, sharing a drink, their faces so close they were almost touching. They didn't look like brother and sister. They looked like a couple. A deep, cold knot formed in my stomach. The timeline started to click into place. My mother and Henry got married just 6 months after she graduated. I was born 10 months after their wedding. It was plausible. It was horribly, sickeningly plausible. The final piece of the puzzle from that attic came from a box of old letters. Most were mundane postcards from family vacations, letters from my grandparents. But at the very bottom, I found a small bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. They were from David to Catherine, sent during the summer after she graduated and just before she got engaged to Henry. I sat on the dusty floor, my heart pounding, and read them. The words were a confirmation of my worst fears. They weren't the letters of a brother to a sister. They were love letters, passionate, desperate, and filled with a sense of shared secrecy. One passage leaped out at me. "Kathy, I know the choice you've made. He's a goo. D-man, a safe man, he'll give you the life you think you want. But please don't forget what we have. Don't forget me. No matter what happens, I will always be yours." The choice she'd made, the safe man. He was talking about Henry, my father. My entire life, my entire family structure was a consolation prize. My mother had chosen the stable, dependable man, but she had been in love with his brother. And I was the product of that forbidden love, a living, breathing secret they had all agreed to keep. The letters were proof, tangible, undeniable proof. I carefully placed them in my bag, along with the revealing photos. The attic was no longer just a storage space for memories, it was a crime scene, and I had just collected all the evidence I needed. Armed with the DNA results, the photos, and the letters, I had the what, who, and how. But I was still missing the why. Why Henry? Why did they choose him to be the unknowing participant in their lifelong deception? And why did my Uncle David, who claimed in his letters to love my mother so much, stand by and watch another man raise his child? These questions haunted me. I needed more than just historical evidence. I needed a human perspective, but I couldn't confront the main architects of the lie yet. Not until I was ready. My plan for the Christmas dinner was beginning to form in my mind, a dark and vengeful seed, and I knew that a premature confrontation would ruin it. It had to be done on my terms, in a way that would strip them of their power and their carefully constructed public image. So, I decided to seek out the one person who might have seen the truth from the sidelines. My mother's aunt, my great-aunt Carol. Aunt Carol was my grandmother's younger sister, now in her late 70s. She was sharp as a tack, but had always been on the periphery of the family, seen as a bit of an eccentric. She and my mother had a strained relationship, and she rarely came to the big family gatherings anymore, citing a dislike for all the phoniness. I remembered her as a woman who never minced words. If anyone knew a secret and was willing to share it, it would be her. I called her and said I was still working on my family history project and wanted to ask her some questions about the old days. She seemed pleased to hear from me and invited me over for tea that afternoon. Her house was just as I remembered it, filled with books, antiques, and the scent of lavender. We sat in her cozy living room, and after some initial pleasantries, I gently steered the conversation toward my mother and uncle's relationship when they were younger. "I found some old photos of Mom and Uncle David from college," I began, watching her face carefully. They seemed incredibly close. Aunt Carol took a slow sip of her tea, her gaze knowing. "Close," she said, her voice dry. "That's one word for it. Inseparable was more like it, worrisomely so." She paused, then seemed to make a decision. "Your grandmother, God rest her soul, was beside herself. It wasn't natural, the way they were with each other. Everyone saw it, but no one dared to say anything. Their parents just ignored it, pretended it was a normal sibling bond." This was it, the confirmation I was looking for. I pushed a little further, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Did something happen before my mom met Henry?" Carol set her teacup down with a soft click. "Your mother got herself into a bit of trouble in her last year of university," she said, choosing her words carefully. "She was ambitious, you know, always wanted a perfect life, a respectable husband, a powerful career. David. Well, David was brilliant and charming, but he was also wild back then. Not the stable, predictable man a girl like Catherine needed to secure the future she wanted. And being with him, really being with him, was impossible. Taboo, it would have been a scandal that would have ruined her." She looked me straight in the eye. And then, suddenly, Henry came into the picture. He was perfect. Steady, kind, from a good family, and completely smitten with her. He was her life raft, her perfect cover. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. My mother, facing a life-altering secret and a potentially scandalous future with her own brother, found a solution. A safe man. A kind, unsuspecting man who would give her the life she wanted and give her child a legitimate name. Henry wasn't a choice she made out of love. He was a choice she made out of strategic necessity. My very existence was the trouble Aunt Carol was talking about. And my Uncle David, the man who wrote those passionate letters, he agreed to it. He stepped aside and let another man take his place, all to protect my mother's reputation and his own. They had used Henry. They had used his love, his trust, his decency, and built their entire lie on top of it. He wasn't just a victim of a lie of omission. He was the central pillar of their deception, and he never Eve. Anne knew it. I felt a surge of protective rage for him, so pure and so fierce it almost choked me. He deserved so much better than this. He had given his entire life to a woman who had used him and a child he thought was his. The injustice of it was staggering. I thanked Aunt Carol for her honesty, my mind racing. She must have seen the look on my face, because as I was leaving, she put a hand on my arm. "Madison," she said softly, "the truth has a way of coming out eventually. Just be careful who gets hurt in the explosion." I knew she was right, but at that moment, I didn't care about the explosion. Catherine and David had built a fortress of lies to protect themselves. I was going to make sure that when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just be an explosion. It would be a demolition, and I would be the one holding the detonator. The weeks leading up to Christmas were the strangest and most difficult of my life. I had to interact with my family as if nothing had changed, all while carrying a secret that felt like a physical weight. Every phone call with my mother was a masterclass in deception. Her cheerful questions about my work, her reminders about the Christmas dinner menu, each word was a reminder of her hypocrisy. I was polite, distant, and noncommittal, a performance that I'm sure she chalked up to holiday stress. Conversations with my uncle were even worse. He called once to ask for my help in picking out a gift for my mother. "You know her taste better than anyone, Maddie," he said, his voice laced with the familiar fake warmth that now made my skin crawl. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I gave him a curt, unhelpful suggestion and ended the call as quickly as possible. The hardest part by far was facing Henry, my dad. He was the only innocent party in this entire tragedy, and my heart ached for him. He'd call just to check in, his voice the same calm, steady presence it had always been. He'd tell me about a project he was working on in his workshop or ask about my latest genealogical case. I found myself looking for excuses to see him, to spend time with just him before the storm broke. We had lunch one Saturday, just the two of us, at our favorite old diner. Sitting across from him, watching him talk about his plans for retirement, I felt a profound sadness. I was about to shatter this good man's world. Was revenge on my mother and uncle worth the pain it would inevitably cause him? The question tormented me. But then I would think of the decades of lies, of the way they had used his love and trust as a shield. The truth was not my weapon to hurt him, it was a debt owed to him. He deserved to know the reality of the life he had lived. He deserved to be free of their deception, no matter how much it hurt. My resolve hardened. My friend Liam was my anchor during this time. He was the only person I told. I laid out the whole story for him one evening, my voice cracking as I showed him the DNA results, the photos, the letters. He listened in stunned silence, his usual analytical demeanor giving way to pure shock and anger on my behalf. "Maddie, this is monstrous," he said, his eyes wide. "What are you going to do?" I told him my plan for Christmas dinner. He was quiet for a moment, processing it. "It's going to be brutal," he finally said. "Are you prepared for the fallout?" "They weren't prepared for the consequences when they built a 32-year lie," I retorted, my voice cold. "I'm just delivering the bill." Liam became my co-conspirator. He helped me think through the logistics, how to present the information for maximum impact. As a data analyst, he was methodical and unemotional about the process, which was exactly what I needed. Together, we prepared what we started calling the Truth Portfolio. It was a simple, elegant presentation of the undeniable facts. We made high-quality copies of the letters from David to Catherine. We scanned the incriminating photos from her college album and had them professionally printed. And, of course, we printed the DNA reports, highlighting the parent-child prediction between me and David and the corresponding uncle-niece result for Henry. We compiled everything into 3 beautiful, custom-made leather-bound folios, one for Catherine, one for David, and one for Henry. On the cover of each, embossed in simple gold lettering, was the date, Christmas Eve. The final step was the toast. I spent hours writing and rewriting what I would say. It couldn't be an emotional outburst. It had to be calm, deliberate, and utterly devastating. I wanted my words to be as cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, cutting through their decades of lies with precision. I practiced it in front of my mirror until I could say it without my voice shaking, my expression a mask of detached composure. I was not the grieving daughter. I was the deliverer of a long-overdue reckoning. As Christmas Eve approached, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The emo. Chanel turmoil had been replaced by a singular, focused purpose. The stage was set. The props were ready. The script was memorized. The annual portrait of the perfect family was about to be taken for the very last time, and I was going to be the one to expose the rot behind the canvas for everyone to see. Christmas Eve arrived cloaked in a deceptively picturesque snowfall. My parents' house was lit up, warm and inviting, a perfect Rockwell painting of holiday cheer. The scent of roasted turkey and pine needles filled the air, a smell that had meant comfort and safety to me for my entire life. Tonight, it smelled like hypocrisy. I walked in carrying a bottle of expensive champagne and the beautifully wrapped folios, which I placed under the tree among the other gifts. My mother, Catherine, greeted me with a hug, her perfume cloying and artificial. "Madison, darling, you look wonderful, so glad you're here." I smiled a tight, empty smile. Uncle David was already there, standing by the fireplace, laughing about something with Henry. Watching them together, the deceiver and the deceived, sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Dinner was an exercise in supreme self-control. I sat at the polished dining table, the same table where we had celebrated every major milestone of my life, and participated in the charade. I passed the mashed potatoes, complimented my mother on the turkey, and listened to my uncle tell a long, self-congratulatory story about a recent legal victory. I watched Henry, my dad, beaming with pride as he looked around the table, his heart full of love for a family that was a complete fiction. Each minute felt like an hour. I could feel the weight of the folios under the tree, a ticking time bomb waiting for me to press the trigger. I ate very little, my stomach a tight knot of anticipation and dread. Finally, the meal was winding down. The plates were cleared and dessert was served. This was the moment. Traditionally, this was when Henry would propose a toast, a heartfelt, sometimes rambling speech about family and gratitude. But this year, I stood up before he had the chance, tapping my glass with a spoon. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to me. "I'd like to propose a toast this year," I said, my voice clear and steady, resonating in the sudden silence. I saw a flicker of surprise on my mother's face, but she quickly replaced it with an indulgent smile. "How lovely, dear," she said. I picked up my champagne flute. "This is a toast to family," I began, letting the word hang in the air, "and to the secrets that bind families together, sometimes for generations." I looked from my mother to my uncle. I saw the first hint of unease in their eyes. They knew my tone was off. This wasn't the daughter they knew. As some of you know, my work is in genealogy. I spend my days uncovering the truth of people's pasts. It's a fascinating job. You learn that family trees aren't always what they seem. Sometimes there are hidden branches, and sometimes the roots are rotten. I let my eyes lock onto my mother S. Her smile was gone, replaced by a rigid mask of confusion. David had stopped swirling the brandy in his glass. Henry was looking at me with a slightly puzzled but still loving expression. "This year," I continued, my voice dropping slightly, "I decided to do a little digging into our own family's history, and I found something. A 32-year-old secret. A secret that starts with 2 people in this room." I walked over to the Christmas tree and picked up the 3 leather folios. My hands were perfectly steady. I returned to the table and placed one directly in front of my mother. Then I walked around the table and placed the second one in front of my uncle. I saved the last one for Henry. I placed it gently beside his dessert plate. A little Christmas gift. From me to you, I said softly. Please, open them. There was a thick, suffocating silence as their fingers fumbled with the ribbons. My mother was the first to open hers. I watched as her eyes scanned the first page, a high-resolution copy of the DNA report showing David's name next to the word father. Her face, a carefully maintained facade of grace and composure, crumbled. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, horrified gray. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with sheer panic. Across the table, David stared at his own copy, his face a mixture of disbelief and fury. He shot a venomous glare at me, his mask of the jovial uncle vaporized. Then I watched Henry. He opened the folio slowly, his brow furrowed in confusion. He looked at the DNA report, but it was the letters that caught his attention. He picked one up, his eyes scanning David's familiar handwriting. I saw the exact moment the meaning of the words registered. It was a slow, agonizing dawning, a wave of understanding that washed over his face, erasing every trace of holiday cheer. He looked from the letter to Catherine, then to David, then back to the letter. His face, which had been so full of warmth and love just moments before, became a mask of profound, shattering betrayal. The silence was broken by a choked sob from my mother. "Madison, how could you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I raised my glass. "I believe I was proposing a toast," I said, my voice ringing with cold finality. "To the truth. May it finally set us free. Merry Christmas." I took a long, slow sip of my champagne, the bubbles tasting like victory and ashes. The explosion I had anticipated was not loud, but it was utterly devastating. It was a silent, emotional detonation that sucked all the air out of the room. My mother, Catherine, just sat there, her hands covering her mouth, silent tears streaming down her face, her perfect makeup ruined. The university dean, the woman who commanded auditoriums, was rendered speechless. My uncle, David, the eloquent lawyer, opened and closed his mouth several times, but no words came out. His face was a dark thundercloud of rage and shame. He looked from me to his sister, a silent, panicked conversation passing between them. Their secret, the one they had protected for more than 3 decades, was out, and they had nowhere to hide. But my focus was on Henry. He hadn't said a word. He sat completely still, his eyes fixed on the love letter in his hands. He read it over and over, as if trying to force the words to mean something else. Then, very slowly, he placed the letter back in the folio, closed the cover, and pushed it to the center of the table. He stood up, his movements stiff and deliberate. He didn't look at Catherine. He didn't look at David. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw an ocean of pain so deep it threatened to drown me. There was no anger, not yet, just a profound, hollowed-out sorrow. He didn't yell or scream. He simply turned, walked out of the dining room, and a moment later, we heard the front door close quietly behind him. That quiet click was louder than any shout. It was the sound of a life breaking. It was the sound of our family, as I knew it, ending. The immediate aftermath was chaos. As soon as Henry was gone, my mother's shock turned to hysterical fury. "What have you done?" she shrieked at me, her voice ragged. "You have destroyed this family. For what? Some childish need for drama?" David finally found his voice. "This was a private matter, Madison," he hissed, standing up so abruptly his chair nearly fell over. "You had no right. This is vindictive and cruel." "Cruel?" I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You want to talk about cruel? Let's talk about lying to a man for 32 years. Let's talk about letting him raise a child that wasn't his. Let's talk about building your entire life on the back of his trust and decency. Don't you dare talk to me about cruelty." I left them there, in the ruins of their Christmas dinner, and went to find Henry. He wasn't at their house. His car was gone. I spent the next few hours calling his phone, which went straight to voicemail. I drove to all his favorite spots, the park, the diner, his workshop, but he was nowhere. The victory I had planned felt sour, overshadowed by a deep, gnawing worry for the man I still considered my father. It was Liam who finally found him. I had called him in a panic, and he used his data skills to track Henry's phone to a small motel 60 miles out of town. I drove there in the dark, my heart in my throat. I found him sitting in his room, staring at the wall. The folio I had given him was on the table beside him. When he saw me, he didn't say anything at first. I sat down opposite him and the silence stretched on. "Is it true?" he finally asked, his voice raspy. "All of it." I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. He shook his head slowly. "It's not your fault, Maddie," he said, using my childhood nickname. "You didn't create the lie, you just turned on the light." The months that followed were a slow, painful rebuilding. Henry filed for divorce. He moved out of the house he had shared with Catherine for over 30 years and into a small apartment. He was quiet and withdrawn, but he never shut me out. Our relationship changed, of course. The biological tie was gone, but it was replaced by something else, something forged in shared trauma and a deliberate choice to remain family. We talked for hours, processing the betrayal. He told me about all the little moments of doubt he'd suppressed over the years, the subtle signs that his wife and brother-in-law were too close. My revelation, he said, was a painful liberation. It allowed him to finally see the truth he had subconsciously been avoiding. As for Catherine and David, their lives imploded. Their perfect reputations were shattered. The scandal ripped through their social and professional circles. Catherine was forced to take a sabbatical from her position as dean, and David lost many of his clients, who no longer trusted the family lawyer who had so profoundly betrayed his own. They tried to contact me, sending letters and leaving voicemails filled with accusations and pleas for forgiveness. I ignored them all. They are no longer a part of my life. The portrait of my old family is gone forever, but in its place, something new and more honest is growing. It's a smaller picture, just me and Henry, but it's real. We are a family not of blood, but of choice, and for the first time in my life, I finally know what that truly means.